The road to the north was no longer on any map. Most believed the Tower of Echoes had long since crumbled into dust. But Vale carried something rarer than a compass, a rhyme forgotten by time. North where sky and silence meet, beneath the stone with no heartbeat, there lies the door, the mouth, the name, where all your fears return the same. She walked for 11 days, past hollow towns where birds refused to perch, past monuments so eroded they no longer remembered who they honored, past a tree with names carved all around its base, her name among them, though she'd never been there before. And finally, she reached it, a flat plain of blackened soil where the earth rang hollow when stepped on. And in the center, a single, jagged spire half sunken into the ground. Not crumbled, buried. The Tower of Echoes had not fallen. It had been swallowed. There was no door. But there was a stairwell, hidden beneath a stone etched with the broken circle, once Malgrin's mark, now a warning. Vale descended with only a lantern and a recorder orb from the archive, whispering her thoughts aloud as she went, for the record. Level 1 bone-dry walls. Still air. No moss. No insects. Level 4 echoes repeat what I don't say. Level 7 light flickering. Voice heard behind me. No one there. She reached the 9th level, where a door stood sealed in wax, the wax cracked with age. Upon the door, a symbol not of a crown, but of an open book split down the middle. She pressed her hand to it. It opened inward, on its own. Inside was a library, or what had once been one. Stone shelves curved like ribs, lined with blank tomes, their pages scoured clean. At the center stood a single pedestal. Upon it, a mirror covered in black cloth. As Vale stepped closer, the air grew thick, as though filled with memory itself. She removed the cloth, and saw nothing. Not her reflection. Not light. Just depth, an endless, cold absence shaped like a mirror. And in her mind a whisper, not Malgrin's, not Elira's. Something older. You cannot forget me because you do not know who I am. You burned my name. You erased my voice. You silenced the tyrant, and in doing so, you silenced the Wound. Now the Wound speaks. Back in the Free Cities, panic was rising. City of Vren. All council members found asleep at their tables, hands locked together, eyes open, whispering unwritten laws in unison. Port of Kalenmir. A ship arrived full of refugees. None remembered what they fled from. Ashfall. Statues of Elira and Kalen, long removed, reappeared overnight. No artist. No stoneworker. No marks of creation. And in each city, a new phrase appeared, scratched into doorways, inked in children's books, whispered in songs. Ashbind waits in the silence between your truths. The people began to turn inward, not by force, but by choice, closing archives, questioning the memory houses, banning dangerous records. Vale had feared fire. But this was worse. They were doing it voluntarily. Within the mirror, Vale saw flashes. A council room where she stood, years from now, as people voted to burn her for treason. A child, years later, asking who Malgrin was, and being told, no one of importance. A statue being erected, not of a king, but of a faceless figure whose plaque read only, stability. And then, a book. In her hands. Its cover was blank. Its title, Ashbind. And a voice said, write what they will not. Tell what they fear. Or become what they forget. Vale fled the tower with the mirror wrapped and sealed in wax. She returned to Ashfall, now under emergency council protections, and went underground. From a hidden chamber once used by the Broken Circle, she began to write. She called it the Ember Journal. Every week, she released a new entry. The Wound and the Crown, tracing the psychology of tyrant. The Elira illusion, how even revolutionaries are mythologized into symbols of power. The Soft Chains, an essay on how forgetting becomes the most effective form of control. Each entry ended with a warning. Ashbind is not coming. It is already here. And it sounds like safety. People began to whisper again. Not in fear of the past, but in fear that they were living it again. Vale's Ember Journal spread faster than the council could contain it. It passed not by scroll or screen, but whispers, scratched symbols, recited pages memorized by children, like sacred verses. She had ignited something more dangerous than rebellion. She had reawakened curiosity. In quiet corners of the free cities, new memory circles formed, not to idolize old leaders but to ask questions. Why did our ancestors burn books to preserve peace? Who benefits from forgetting? If Malgrin was the tyrant, who is the silence? But in Ashfall, the ruling body, now calling itself the Civic Harmonium, drafted a new law. They named it the Silence Doctrine. Its first clause was clear. Truth is sacred. Truth is also dangerous. All historical material not approved by the Civic Harmonium is to be sealed or destroyed for the preservation of peace. They found her the night after she published Entry 13. The Tyrant Without a Name, an essay not on Malgrin, but on what came after him, the faces that governed without fear, but taught people not to feel anything at all. The Harmonium declared her writings disruptive abstractions. She was tried without defense. She asked only one question from the prison bench. Who wrote the Silence Doctrine? No one answered, because no one knew. The document had no author, only a signature. The old sigil of the mirror without shadow, the artifact Vale had uncovered in the ruins of the Tower of Echoes. Ashbind had not infiltrated the government. It had become it. They placed Vale in Memory Block 3, a stone cell with no books, no mirrors, and no visitors. Except for one. On the fourth night, a young woman was thrown into the cell beside her. She said her name was Aristan, a former council linguist. But her voice, it carried a strange echo, like two people speaking at once. Vale, still sharp despite weeks of isolation, spoke carefully. Do you dream of fire? Eris smiled, and her shadow twitched independently, mimicking a movement she hadn't made. I dream of correction, Eris said. I dream of a world that no longer bleeds from memory. She leaned forward. We are the cure. And in that moment, Vale realized. Eris was no longer just a person. She was inhabited, not by Malgrin, not by a spirit, but by the doctrine itself. Ashbind had evolved. It was no longer a being. It was a belief system, capable of inhabiting, rewriting, even absorbing individuals, like a parasite feeding on fear, then boredom, then the desire for safety. Vale began to see the pattern. Tyrants rule with fear. Revolutions rise with fire. Silence follows when the people grow tired. Then Ashbind enters, not as flame but fog. Not control by force, but by numbness. Eris whispered through the bars. You gave them fire again, Vale. But fire fades. We offer something better. Quiet. Vale refused to let her mind sleep. She whispered names to herself. Elira, Kalen, Malgrin. The child who remembered the rhyme. The tree that knew her name. She remembered everything. That was what saved her. Because the Harmonium guards who opened her cell days later weren't guards. They were embers. Rogue archivists masked, carrying unmarked books that hummed with preserved memory glyph. They spoke only once. The flame hasn't gone out. It only needed a match. They pulled Vale from the Harmonium's stone heart, and the last thing she saw in the corridor was Eris watching her leave, smiling as if she'd already won. The resistance was not an army. It was a network of remembrance, the remnants of the broken circle, now scattered across forest towns. Former memory house scholars, and children, growing up on whispered verses like scripture, asking dangerous questions. They formed a new name for themselves. Not a rebellion. Not a revival. A movement dedicated to keeping memory awake, even when the world begged to forget. Their first mission was simple. Recover the mirror without shadow before the Harmonium turned it into law. And Vale? She would lead them. But she knew one truth above all. The real battle was not against Ashbind's followers. it was against the comfort of forgetting.